All right, welcome back, everybody, to the ATB NFL Live Show. We're finally back. It's been a little while. Wanted to both take a break, and we may or may not have just kind of forgotten that the show existed last week, but that's
Oops.
that's not really here nor there. But we are back. It is Combine week, so plenty of things to talk about. Still plenty of news going on in the NFL as well, mostly centered around quarterbacks. We're going to stick
And
mostly to that.
and there's
But
always that XFL triple header today.
oh, the XFL. Listen,
Oh, that's happening?
Yeah.
I have battled back and forth about if I'm even going
Hey,
to
it's not
acknowledge
bad.
it, but
It's not bad.
it hasn't been bad. Yeah,
There's been drama. Did you guys
Yeah,
hear about the
there's been
quarterback drama
which was it the one that like
in Orlando?
gave plays to the
yeah, no. The Orlando cut and the dude Quentin Dormady has been dismissed from the XFL
Yeah.
because he was giving away plays to their opposing teams.
That's so crazy.
And like his entire existence has been erased from the website.
Yeah,
So
I know like it's still professional football, like, but why are we doing this stuff? And like, what is the benefit to doing that, man? Like
giving people an opportunity.
I'm talking about the guy like giving plays up. I'm like,
Oh,
what are we
well,
doing?
yeah. Well,
like, why would you
Orlando's
jeopardize yourself?
awful. Orlando's
Well,
awful.
Fair enough, but still.
Anyways.
So I've been trying to decide if I'm going to acknowledge their existence, but I'll probably get there at some point. But yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about. A lot of both interesting and unbelievable combine performances, I would say, so far. Today's the last day of the combine. We're not going to get into any of the offensive line, running back stuff, unfortunately, but didn't want to push things out any further. So we're going to talk about the first couple of days of the combine. We're going to start with really just kind of going into a lot of the quarterback news related stuff first. And I wanted to start with rumor because I know Zach wants to talk about this. Want to make sure we don't skip over it. The whole Tua, like they're looking at different quarterbacks, due diligence is being thrown around a lot. Like, what's going on there? Like, what's your thoughts on that whole process? And do you expect it to really mean much of anything by the time that free agency kicks off and everything?
I mean, so obviously after this season, and I mean, I think last year's injury was more of an aberration because look, the man got absolutely obliterated in a sack and broke a couple ribs. It happens. You miss a few games. So it's happened to so many quarterbacks. That one, I think that's different. This year, we're talking about a completely different circumstance. So now my issue comes, like you said, with the comment and the phrasing due diligence. As a front office, as a GM, as a coach, it is your job every offseason to look at the 53-man roster and say, what can we do to make this better? And they have a massive decision to make here. Do we give Tua the fifth-year option, or do we cap it at 4, say, hey, we got to see something, and then work on an extension throughout the year, depending on what happens? I don't think that them saying they're doing due diligence on Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers and all these people is them saying they're just going away from Tua, because one, look at their cap space. They don't have the necessarily the ability to bring in a quarterback like that and then also take the dead cap for the next few years without some major moves. And they also only have 43 people on the roster right now. So you're going to do this all for one quarterback when, again, concussions, you don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully with the extended period that he did have to end the season to get back to being healthy and some stuff that they do in the offseason, they can figure some things out on how to better avoid some of this. But it is also football. This stuff happens. So hopefully that isn't the long-term case for his career. But I don't necessarily think that I think they're doing more due diligence on finding a backup, because it's been 2 straight years of just awful backup performance when Tua has been out. So it's become very clear for Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins front office that it's time to find somebody that if he does get injured, we don't all of a sudden just have a big losing streak and jeopardize our possibility of going into the playoffs. Because Skylar Thompson, you know what? I'll give it.
He hung 31 in a playoff game.
He did, and he was getting better. And
he got let down.
All I can ask from that's all I can ask from a rookie 7th round pick in the playoffs, doing like his 2nd or 3rd start. So that's one thing. But Teddy Bridgewater, Jacoby Brissett, the guys that you're supposed to be bringing in to like actually be the veteran presence and run the offense, that's where it gets disappointing. So I'll give Mike McDaniel the pass on Teddy Bridgewater, because that was his like first one, and he like somewhat looked decent with Denver, and it was maybe just like a change of scenery and being that back guy.
And he kept getting hurt too.
And he kept getting hurt too. Yeah.
His issues too.
So So, and that's very important because that talk about a guy that, man, what would have happened if his whole leg just hadn't exploded? Because that man, he was fantastic.
He was a really good prospect, yeah.
But no, it's going to be bringing in. It would be interesting to see maybe Mike White from New York because there's been a lot of comments about him being thrown around. We were talking about Taylor Heineke before the show, but I think he stays in Washington. There are some good options, but they just need to find somebody who's and backup quarterback is hard because you're literally just asking somebody to sit on the sideline and wait for that moment to just pop in there and be like, hey, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do this. So that's where I think that the more due diligence is taking place here, because that is definitely a position of need that they've shown over the past few seasons.
Anything you want to add to that, Tony?
Yeah, I think the first point you made, Zach, is spot on. If a front office is not doing due diligence at every position, they shouldn't have a job. I mean, it's literally their job to build and maintain a 53-man roster that compete in the NFL. If you are not always actively looking at every position, you are doing a disservice to your team. So it does not surprise me. And then you throw in that, unfortunately, Tua is building quite an extensive injury history. You have to be on top of that position. Because when Tua is healthy, we know he can be the guy. But he's now like six straight years almost of just like some random injury popping up. And he's a smaller guy, and those things kind of compound on each other. So you should be way on top of backup QB, like Zach was saying. And then I also think, yeah, you should call Eric DeCosta and say, hey man, like, what's going on over there? How are those negotiations going? You should be calling these teams. Why not? It doesn't hurt to ask the question. Like it
exactly.
That is due diligence. That is what you should be doing as a GM. So I think
asking the question doesn't mean you're vacating your current plan. It just means you're asking the question.
Yeah, you should just be aware of the landscape, as like that is the job title. You are aware of the NFL landscape at every position. So I don't think they're going to be looking to supplant Tua this year unless Lamar Jackson does come available and it kind of makes sense to them. But I do think that they should be aggressive about who they bring in as a backup. I think they should be smart about it. It shouldn't be a guy with an injury history, because we saw Teddy Two Gloves play well and then get injured every time he had to come in. It should just be somebody reliable, and then you should just leave some flexibility in the future as you continue to survey the QB landscape going forward.
Yeah, and like you just said, always make the call. Who knows? Like these negotiations between Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have been going on for so long. God knows, you make a random phone call one afternoon, and Eric DeCosta's like, I'm over this shit. Send me a second round pick. Let's get. Who cares? Who cares? That wouldn't happen, obviously. But I'm just saying, it just never hurts to make the call.
No, it doesn't. Yeah,
because you never know. The NFL is insane.
I think the biggest thing for me with this, and I'll just kind of cap it off with this. So this offense that McDaniels runs, it is literally the perfect offense for Tua. And Tua is the perfect quarterback for what he wants to do. So as far as like whether they're really trying to replace him, that's not really the question I think that they should be asking. It's, do they think he can hold up long term? And that's a question they're not going to have an answer to until at least maybe next year. If next year similar things happen, I think it's over. But I want to see that happen first, because we saw when he was playing, the offense was putting up stupid numbers, just absolutely ridiculous numbers. And it was with him doing stuff that, like, yeah, you see the same limitations with him, but the limitations don't matter whenever you have the weapons that they have and whenever you have an offense that's geared towards his strengths. Yeah, there's going to be moments like where he throws it in the coverage. There's no hope of throwing it into, like, in the Bengals game before he got hurt. Like, that stuff's going to happen sometimes. But every quarterback has those moments. It's whether or not you can maximize the other things he does well, and that's what they've done. So the question is, again, really, can he do it long term? And they're going to hopefully find that out. But in the short term, you do have to think about, like, can we get a guy who we feel more confident in being able just to hold up? Because I think that's really the biggest problem here. It's not about his level of play, obviously. It's about that aspect of it. And then you do have to upgrade backup quarterback. You have to bring somebody in who you think not only can run this offense effectively, but isn't going to get hurt himself. Like, that's just kind of what you're dealing with. And, like, unfortunately, a lot of the guys that are backups, they're either backups because they're not that good or because they can't stay healthy or they can't stay consistent. So that's going to be a hard thing to do, but that's something I think they do have to definitely focus on this offseason. So we'll see what happens with that. But talking about a quarterback that's they may or may not be interested in, may not be talking about, Lamar Jackson, apparently there's a chance that he may be a candidate for the non-exclusive franchise tag. So for those who do not know that or not really know anything about that, you've probably heard of the just franchise tag because that's the most common tag that's used. But the non-exclusive tag essentially allows an open bidding from other teams to come in and try to sign him to a contract that you can either match as the team that tagged him or let him go for 2 first-round picks. Now, we've rarely seen, mostly because, again, you open up negotiations with other teams, you allow them to negotiate with them. But sometimes it can be smart because if you're willing to give up that player for 2 first-round picks, really the only harm is whether or not they give him a contract that's so crazy that you can't match it. With Lamar, and I'm curious what you guys think about this because we did talk a little bit about a pre-show, but I want to kind of get more into it. Does it make any substantial sense? Because I personally think it doesn't to give him the tag because I do think a team is going to be willing, at least one or two, to sign him to a contract the Ravens have not been willing to give him up to this point. And if they do that, the Ravens either hamstring themselves with that contract that they don't want to give him, or they only get 2 first-round picks for him when they could very likely get much more than that in an open trade situation. So I'm going to go to Tony on this one first.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. It's tough, man.
It is.
I've long been of the opinion that the Ravens and Lamar will find a way, but every day that passes, it seems like that's not likely. And I'm starting to understand, like, the more I observe about the process, I'm starting to understand why that's really difficult. When a player of his just like level of recognition and stature and everything and value is representing themselves, that makes negotiations difficult as hell. Because if he had an agent, the Ravens' sticking point on the fully guaranteed contract is that, hey man, this guy hasn't finished a season for us in a while. And the way he plays, the way we play him, yeah, we have a part in it, but everything about him, like, we can't guarantee 5 years because he can't guarantee 5 years for us. And you can say that to an agent, and that agent will be like, you are making some sense, and they will find the right guaranteed number to land on. When you're talking to Lamar Jackson, you can't say, hey man, your immune system is shit and you're always getting injured. Like, you can't say that to the player because it destroys that relationship. So they have to walk on eggshells in this negotiation, and the reasons they're afraid to give a fully guaranteed contract, they can't really talk about with him because it is the player himself. So I understand the intricacies of why this is like a problem.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the non-exclusive franchise tag that I'm coming around on, and we talked about this a little bit pre-show, but how many teams out there are willing to give a quarterback a fully guaranteed deal? We've seen it happen twice. We've seen the Minnesota Vikings do it with Kirk Cousins. Kind of unique circumstances where it was just 3 years, $30 million each. Like that. Shit, hand that to him today. Three years, $90 million, fully guaranteed. Do that today. So that I don't really count that. The other one is the Deshaun Watson one, and that is really the crux of this entire issue.
An outlier. Yeah.
And I think the
Kirk Cousins contract walked so that the Deshaun Watson contract could run.
Seriously. And I think that there's one ownership group in the NFL that is willing and wants to do a deal of that type, and they've already done it. It is the Browns. So now the Ravens are saying, hey, we are going to put this tag on our player. If nobody else wants to sign him, we have him for like whatever it is, like $38 million, and we can continue to negotiate.
Actually, only 32, I think, for the non-exclusive tag. So
all the better.
Yeah.
But if they're fishing to see if another team is willing to do that fully guaranteed contract, and then once another team proves they're willing, then they can decide, okay, now is it actually worth it to just match the deal? Or do we just take 2 first-round picks? And I really think there's only one team that could screw them over if they do that, and that's the Washington Commanders, because everybody else that's doing it is in the top 10. Let's say the Colts want to do it, and oh no, I lose Lamar. I have the 4th overall pick and an extra first next year on what's probably going to be not that great of a team. Same story with like the Atlanta Falcons, the Carolina Panthers, the Las Vegas Raiders. Anybody who wants him are usually in that top 10 group, even the Tennessee Titans at 11. But the Commanders at 16, they also want a quarterback. And they have a pretty good pitch to Lamar saying, hey, we have Eric Bieniemy, and you don't really have to move that far away from where you're already living. Like, they have something there. And that's the one team where, like, oh, shit, now we're just taking the 16th overall pick for Lamar. Like, that sucks. But I think all the other ones, it creates a real decision. So it'll be super interesting to see how it plays out. And I'm starting to think that tag might actually be used, like reports are saying.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think it's possible. But what do you think, Zach, on this one?
That's interesting. I didn't think about the Commanders. That's very interesting. So look, like we talked about like availability and stuff, but then you also can't deny the fact that Lamar Jackson is an absolute just alien on the field. People talk about Josh Allen and stuff like that, but like Lamar is single-handedly carrying the Ravens. And that was the point that you made, Tony, is like, yeah, the Ravens can look at him and say he's getting injured, but part of the reason he's getting injured is where are his receivers? Where is his help? Like they haven't really done much to like back him up. And if the Ravens want to look at Lamar Jackson and say that, oh, he can turn around right around and be like, hey, remember Hollywood Brown? Remember all these like these little things that you did for me? Hey, I need more. I need like an actual guys on the outside. And that's where I brought up DaCosta. And I was saying that he's tired of this shit. He's the one that is the problem here, I feel like, in this negotiation, because we have now seen
Just ask
multiple.
Rashad Bateman.
Rashad Bateman, ask Hollywood Brown, ask there was another guy that quote tweeted Bateman's tweet, and I forget, it was another former Ravens player. It seems as though the negotiations in the Ravens front office with players is not necessarily the best, specifically on offense. And I mean, they've been running run first offense for quite some time, and I mean, it's kind of worked. And when you get to the playoffs, it works, but not when it's coming at the health of your all-pro MVP quarterback, and you need him for all 16 games, all 17 games. Oh my gosh. So yeah, no, it's such a weird situation, and like we bring up it when representing yourself, we don't see it all that often. But it brings up some very interesting wrinkles. And for a player of his stature, that's what makes this even more interesting, because you don't see when like it's different when it's like a random guy on offense or defense that's like representing themselves because like maybe they can't get an agent or something like that. But for somebody who easily could get an agent, it's very interesting for a player of his stature. Like it definitely. It's giving a little bit of player empowerment, which it's been nice to see. We've been seeing this trend, and like especially with some of these surveys that have come out from some of these teams from the NFLPA. I do think that we could see some more like player voices that are a bit more louder to like get the ownership and front offices a bit more liable for how they act and the decisions they make, because at the end they are all humans. So I mean, Lamar's just going for himself, and you can't blame him.
At the end of the day with Lamar, I think the problem with this at the end of the day is like putting the non-exclusive tag on him. It just opens you up to some very negative consequences, right? I think the potential positives are there. Like if a team shows that they're only willing to sign him to a deal that the Ravens are willing to give him, then it really doesn't do anything other than make the negotiations easier for him, like for both of them. That's really the best outcome. If a team like, you said the Commanders, possibly Tony, the Jets is a team I think of because they're a team that I think is ready to win if they have the right quarterback in there, which they've been linked to Derek Carr and to other guys, but
see,
I think that's easier. Yeah,
the Jets can't afford a fully guaranteed deal for Lamar Jackson. They would have to do a standard like Josh Allen deal, which then the Ravens can match. Cap space matters in this conversation.
What
Jets
about
are spending like the most on offense in the league. The Giants, similar story, no cap space. It'd make it incredibly difficult.
Well, I mean, I pulled up the cap when we were having this conversation because I was
future years. They can make it work year one, but you can't restructure. Can't restructure deals that are fully guaranteed.
Okay.
So the problem is again, you'd have to work your cap around it. But I don't think that honestly, and this is kind of the problem that I have with it, is I don't think the Ravens are just looking at not fully guaranteeing the contract. I think if a team gives him a certain amount of guaranteed money, they will not match it. I think that if it was just simply like a fully guaranteed deal, then maybe, but I don't think that's really what the whole hang up is personally.
Wasn't the original offer, he turned down a 5-year offer this past year that would have set records in cash and been the second highest guaranteed to a QB in NFL history.
But it wasn't more than Deshaun.
It wasn't more than Deshaun Watson because that was $230 million guaranteed.
This is the
but it was like 165 guaranteed.
This is the problem with this whole scenario is this is what we thought was going to happen when the Cowboys traded for Amari Cooper. This is like the whole like trend or the whole market reset for wide receivers and all that we thought was coming, and then honestly went away very, very quickly. This deal that the Cleveland Browns gave Deshaun Watson has absolutely screwed up I mean, the only person who you can arguably give a better deal to is Patrick Mahomes. And they've done that. They've already locked him up for long term. The Chiefs have already done that. They can do some restructuring and talk about maybe if things, I mean, if he gets better, which that's an insane statement to make, if he gets better, because it's already Patrick Mahomes. But like, this is going to be an issue for the Bills when it comes around for Josh Allen's next contract, because what does Josh Allen have to say that he's like, no, why shouldn't I get more guaranteed money or less guaranteed money than
See, I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Deshaun Watson?
I think there are very few so Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, right? They had a ton of cards. Patrick Mahomes specifically. Josh Allen, his deal I think can be separate. Like Patrick Mahomes, he had every right to ask for, hey, I want a short-term, fully guaranteed deal because I want to be due next time the TV deal hits, and I want the next big deal. He signed a 10-year, $500 million deal with low guarantees because he knew that meant the team could take their medicine any year they wanted, and they could always build a functional Super Bowl worthy team around him. Josh Allen did the same shit. There are quarterbacks who are willing to sacrifice that full guarantee, knowing full well, as long as they're healthy, they're going to see that money come through so that their team can win. When you go with the fully guaranteed contract, you are hurting your team a lot. And yeah, I know I sound like I'm shilling for the billionaires here right now, but you kill any flexibility. When you have a permanent $50 million per year cap hit, you can't do shit. You are dead in the water. And so I think we're going to see Lamar Jackson being one of very few quarterbacks who wants this deal going forward. The NFL Players Association doesn't want these fully guaranteed deals because it's killing the middle class of football. There's free agents who deserve $10 million who aren't going to be signed in this new world of fully guaranteed deals because you have to go with the cheap rookie. Like, it is not good for football to have 50 million guaranteed deals unless they restructure how the cap works, like from the NFL side. Yeah. Well, so either change the process there or, hey, Lamar, you're one of few here.
Well, I was going to say, I don't necessarily think it's Lamar being one of few. I think you pointed out two good examples of front offices and ownership groups that know what they're doing, but those are few and far between. We've seen that. Like, there's a lot of dumb ownership out there. And that's where I think the issue comes in, is that you get a lot of disgruntled players who, when it comes to negotiations, they're like, oh, hey, well, look what happened with Deshaun Watson. I've been in this awful situation myself for a long time, and I've been doing everything that I can for you guys. Who's to say that I don't deserve that? Like, I've been showing up to, and I think that's where the problem lies. That we were talking about this in the ATB chat the other day with the NFLPA stuff, but like, those NFLPA grades were very, very interesting. Incredibly interesting. And I think very necessary, because a fire needs to be lit under some of these ownership groups to improve what they are doing. These are billion-dollar corporations. These are billion-dollar franchises. There is absolutely zero reason that these players should not be getting the best of the best. What are you telling me? You're making the Cardinals players pay for their food in the offseason?
That was hilarious, man. Like, that is
what?
It's comical. Some of the stuff is comical, but I think
it's insane.
But going back to your point, Tony, about the guaranteed contracts not being that big, like Deshaun Watson's contract not being that much of an issue, I like to think that you're correct, right? Because I think that a lot of quarterbacks you've seen, like even the best of the best, still have contracts that end up being team friendly in the sense that, like, yeah, you're going to have to pay them a ton of money, but that money can be moved around and the money can, this and that, whatever. But I don't think it's that unrealistic for a few of these guys that are coming up to say, you know what, the precedent's been set. A quarterback can be paid $245 million, like $235 million, $245 million guaranteed. I want that because I'm better than him, or I've shown more than him. It only takes a couple of them for a few other guys to say, hey, you know what? And maybe this is what we should be doing. Make the NFL make a move, make them do something.
And injuries play a big part here too.
It does too. Like, if you're a quarterback that you're so confident in your body that you're not worried about getting hurt, you might take that thought process, but you shouldn't, realistically, if we're being smart. And I think even guys like Joe Burrow that are coming up, Herbert, like, yeah, are they haven't had really well. Burrow had his ACL, but he's been pretty much fine since then. Herbert really hasn't had any issues. Even when he hurt himself, he still played. Like he didn't really have any problems there. I wouldn't be surprised like if they want that deal. I don't think they'll take it. I think that especially Burrow won't ask for it.
Well, the problem
The
with
Bengals just
Burrow
won't
is
do it. The
no, I was gonna say Burrow's in the wrong
Bengals
spot.
can't.
Where
They
that's
might,
not,
they
that
might
wouldn't
not
have-
literally.
but
be
he would be one of those people who would have an argument to say, "Hey,
oh,
what
for
have
sure
you
he
guys
would.
done for my offensive line protection? Yeah, I haven't got hurt yet, but I have to protect
Outside of his rookie
myself."
Towards
Yeah.
ACL.
Well, no, but I mean, like, I'm just saying, like,
Ironically, his lineman did kind of do it too.
but I'm just saying, like with I'm not saying like he tore his ACL, but I'm just saying you guys haven't. To say the Bengals front office, you guys haven't shown me that you have the ability to get me protection. So who's to say that if I sign a non-fully guaranteed contract,
yeah, if I blow
or
my
however
knee out
many
again,
years,
or
and
whatever.
then I end up getting majorly hurt again because you guys don't invest in year 2 or 3, and then you guys decide, hey, we're going to pull the plug because we found somebody else. No, I want all my money for me because I can't tell you that you guys can't tell me that you're going to be able to make this like right. I have to fend for myself here. And I think that's where some of this comes, where these ownership groups have to start realizing that it's going to be very hard when you factor in how the game of football is becoming because of all these injuries and how these things are playing out, that the players have to think about their long-term future as well. And it's going to start to be a very fine line because of this contract, because somebody set a precedent of, no, we'll give it all to you. And it just happened to be that it was somebody who was embroiled in one of the biggest scandals that the NFL has seen in quite some time, like actual scandals.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I think we'll talk enough about that. I do want to talk about 2 other quarterbacks really quickly, and then we can get into the combine notes a little bit here before we get going. I want to try to keep it to about an hour if we can. But the next guy I want to talk about for sure, Daniel Dimes here. It's so weird because the the news has been like he wants $45 million at least. That's what we keep hearing.
Me too.
And yeah, see,
I don't deserve
do
it,
too.
but me too.
But again, like the problem with this ultimately is if you look at it from the Giants' perspective, right? They just made the playoffs. Admittedly, Daniel Jones played pretty well most of the year. It wasn't anything spectacular, but he definitely had his best season overall as a pro, both winning and play. How much do you value that? Because clearly they don't want to restart a quarterback right this minute. Now they might want to in like a year or 2 or so. So you don't want to sign him to a gigantic contract. But do you want to go into next year off this momentum of a playoff berth and not be technically at least as good or if not better? Because I don't think there's an easy path that doesn't involve drafting, like trading way up and drafting a quarterback, and even those guys, no guarantee they're going to be as good as Daniel Jones is this minute, at least, outside of maybe like a Bryce Young if he works out, but that's beside the point. You're not going to have an easy way to get better at quarterback right this minute. And I think they want to keep this momentum going. So there's a lot of interest, I think, on both sides to get this deal done. But how much is it ultimately going to cost them? Because if you're approaching $40 million, you can't do it, I don't think. I think you legitimately cannot allow yourself to pay him that much money unless it's like a 2-year, like if you said like a 2-year $80 million deal where it's like $50 million of it's guaranteed, most of which is in the first year, and then you can get out of it next year. Like that kind of contract maybe is fine because again, it's workable. But if you're giving him 3+ years, it cannot be for $40 million, I don't think. And I think you guys probably agree with that. I doubt you do or disagree with that. But if you're approaching again 40 million plus, if you're 30, 35, that's at this point, who cares? Like quarterbacks get paid way more than that just to exist, basically. When you start getting that 40+ million, I don't know if I'm paying Daniel Jones that for any more than 2 years, but let's go to Zach on this one.
How many times was he strip sacked this year? I've been trying to find this and I
this
can't
year.
find it.
Yes. I think it was less than usual.
Like, it's definitely less than usual.
He solved a lot of the turnover.
Okay. So I was going to say pros for Daniel Jones right now. Last year was a great season for him. He showed vast improvement. And could that be because it's in the Brian Daboll offense and that's the coaches you have coming in? So all these things come into play. You do have a 5th-year option.
They declined it.
They declined it.
Oh, that's right. They did. That's the okay. So here's the problem here is you need to see one more season. You can't go off of what last year was because the Giants were the Vikings light. And I say that Vikings light, but they were the same team.
That's very funny. Yeah.
There were just too many flukes this season that you need a 1 or 2 year short-term deal to say, hey, we really appreciate that you took this next step and we believe in you, but we need you to do it again because we don't know. So, and that's fair because
Yeah, it is.
that's, I mean, you're also looking at one of the best rushing quarterbacks from this year. I didn't think I would be saying that at the end of this season.
Hey, Daniel Jones always got the wheels, man.
I mean, he's got the wheels.
And then he
I
just
was-
trips
I was
over
really
himself before getting into the end zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing because I think that's one thing that I've pounded the table on this show for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks is you need great to like above. You need above average to great quarterback play. If you can build a team around that, that's how you can do it. Yes, if you get a guy like Patrick Mahomes and he can just do what he does, that's one way to do it. But like, look at what the Eagles did. Jalen Hurts is not a top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. He could become that. Is he?
No,
Is he?
Let me put
this past year, yes, but
this past year,
yeah.
Will he be moving forward? That's a question, but I think it's possible. Yeah,
in the past season, but like overall, we have 2 seasons, so I mean,
he's also going to get an effing bag this offseason.
He will.
A well-deserved effing bag.
But he's like as far as like a passer. Like there's better passers in the league.
Oh yeah,
he has that athletic ability and he has all the tools that he's a great quarterback and you can build a championship team around him. Is Daniel Jones that great quarterback? They need that 1 or 2 more season to find out. Is he above average? Is he great? Can we build around him before we're like, hey, here's 5 years. I can't say 40, 45 because that's absurd. That's ridiculous. But like 30.
Again, that's kind of, and I want to let Tony chime in on this too, but like that's kind of my point is like I'm willing to give him even like a 3 or 4 year deal as long as you can work your way out of it. If you're looking at like 35-ish or less, I'm okay with that because again, any quarterback you can get that isn't a rookie is going to cost that much if you want him to be better than Daniel Jones. So it doesn't really matter at that point. Like you could just keep the guy that you already have and not have to worry about figuring out if another guy is better than him or not, and still have the potential to get out of it and find a rookie or whatever. But I think the problem with it is if you pay him more than $40 million, one, it really kind of makes the ever screwing quarterback market even more screwed up. Because that just, again, like, because if Daniel Jones is worth $45 million, who isn't worth $45 million? No offense to Daniel Jones. He had a good year this past year, but his track record is not exactly $45 million worth, even in this market of quarterbacks. So I think if you're the Giants, you have to put a line in the sand and be like, listen, if you are under this amount of money for X amount of years, we can have a conversation. If you're not willing to do that, then someone else you can find somewhere else to play. Like that's just what I think they have to do. And it's smart because realistically, if they have, I don't know, like if they try to trade up or they trade Daniel Jones for like a late first to some team that like wants to have, I don't know who it would even be. Point is, if they can get something for him and use that to trade up and get a developmental quarterback either this year or next year, and they just go with like, I don't know, Tyrod Taylor, whoever they have, it doesn't matter. Like they'll still be competitive with this offense with the way that Dabo plays it. But I don't think that, again, Jones is going to move the needle enough by himself where if you can't bring in elite weapons to pair with him, if you can't do that quickly, which they're not going to be able to do, you're not going to really know for sure whether he can be good enough. I think by the time that next year is over, you're going to need a second year, honestly, to build this team, to find that out. And if he's going to get paid $40 million to do that, it might be better just not to do that. That's just kind of what I think. But what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I think us on the outside talking about football, all fans, all analysts, everything, we have a tendency to be more reactive to the moment, right? Like we look at this past year and we look at what Daniel Jones did, and that's what we're talking about. The Giants, they just hired Joe Shayne and Brian Dable. They hired them based off of a bill of goods that they sold them. They sold them on, hey, year one, we're going to clear out all your cap trash, which there's a lot of. We're going to clear it out, and we're going to try to instill a competitive culture, maybe even sneak into the playoffs with the roster that we have so that those young guys going forward can maintain that competitive nature. We want to be a winning organization. But year one is a punt. Year two is the foundation. Year three is where we start to look forward. They're not going to react to one decent season of Daniel Jones and throw that entire plan away and try to do something else. They are going to Now, still try to bring him back if it's reasonable and fits that long-term vision. I think that if you hit him with a franchise tag, or if you hit him with a 3-year, $37.5 million average with first year plus like 10 of the second year guaranteed, where you can realistically get out whenever you kind of want to, I think they could do that. But if it comes to he wants a real quarterback deal, if he wants something real, I think they're very happily going to stick with what their plan was and tell him, well, then we really had a lot of fun with you and we hope you have success in the future. Goodbye. And they're going to take a lot of lumps next season and just be flexible. They're not going to change their plan. Daniel Jones can be in the plan in a way that I've said, like in a low cost, not long-term guarantee kind of way, but they're going to stick to their plan. The Bills did a very similar thing where Tyrod Taylor was the incumbent. They stuck with him. They cleaned out all the cap trash and snuck into the playoffs at 9-7. Lost a gross game in Jacksonville. And you know what they didn't do? They did not remain committed to Tyrod Taylor, despite him playing very well that year and leading us to our first playoff appearance in 17 years. They traded him to the Browns for a third-round pick. And they moved up from 21 and got their guy at 7, Josh Allen. They didn't care what happened that first season, because the first season was always about just getting through it. And then you start to set your foundation and build forward. So I think we're going to see something similar where if Daniel Jones and his agents realize the landscape and say, you know what, we're comfortable with a 3-year, $37.5 million deal with 50 in guarantees, then he'll be the quarterback. But if they say we want a real quarterback deal, see ya. He's gone.
Sounds like Daboll needs to take a trip down to the bayou. Clean up that cap situation.
I don't wish that on anybody.
That would be like
that would be a mess.
That would be a instantaneous Hall of Fame entry.
Yeah, if you can clear that cap situation in a year, go goddamn.
Hey, you see they're starting to do it?
Yeah. Speaking of which, this is the last guy I want to talk about before we finish up with the combine notes. I personally think Derek Carr is a saint from everything we've seen, but
he's just a really good guy, or
well, maybe that's debatable.
And playing in New Orleans.
I'm sorry for the shitty dad joke. I won't do it again.
Yeah, all right. But he's met with a lot of 3 teams in particular. We're looking at the Saints again. Think where he's going to end up. Panthers, which I thought would make some sense on a short-term deal, but probably not. And the Jets. That's who he met with at the combine. Kind of the teams he's connected to ever since he was cut. Again, it looks like it's going to be the Saints. Zach, you just mentioned they're making some cap moves right now that kind of indicate that maybe they are going to try to get that done. I think it makes sense for this deal to get done before free agency actually kicks off, of course, because then you don't have to contend with other teams who are ready to go to have their cap and everything else. But if you're the Saints, like, I don't know what to even say about the Saints, because like, is he clearly like way better than Andy Dalton and whatever Jameis Winston might be? Sure,
yeah,
he is. But like, is you gonna in the NFC South? Yeah, is it probably gonna be bad again?
Do you know what the problem is?
What?
They got their first round pick back.
Yeah,
they got hope again.
Yeah, they shouldn't have
before anybody was like, oh, Sean Payton. It kind of looked like they were accepting their fate and just being like, oh man, we tried, but here we are. But then this all kicked off, and Derek Carr was like, nah, see you later, Las Vegas. I'm done. And Sean Payton was like, I think I'd like to return to the NFL. They got their first round pick back, and now all of a sudden their minds have clicked back into like the gears of overworking.
Let's go.
The engine is smoking, and they're like, we can do this. Our window is open again, but it's not. Because what they're trying to do, and also something that we also need to keep on the horizon. Alvin Kamara is finally going to court.
I don't know.
It does not.
That video is rough.
Like, it's rough. I don't know what's going to happen with his suspension, because he's
getting 6 games.
Not 8
games that gets appealed down to 6 games is my best.
Yeah, I'm a bit more concerned about the actual charges in Las Vegas, because they are not good.
They're not great. No. But.
Yeah, the aggravated assault with bodily harm is the problem for him, because that is merging on a felony, I believe. Yeah, so there's going to be some interesting things, and they're doing it for the veterans that they have, and I can somewhat admire that, but you also have to let go at some point, because let Cameron Jordan go somewhere else and try Cameron Jordan. I got confused for a second because I was thinking
Jordan
of Jordan
Cameron.
Cameron. Yeah.
Classic.
But let Cameron Jordan go somewhere and try to get a ring. Let these guys like actually try to do something with the end of their career instead of holding them hostage because you guys think you have a window. It's done. It's over. Drew Brees is gone. Sean Payton is gone. Tear it down. Get the cap back right and figure it out.
That's what they should do. I think that you're right, Zach. Also, they should let Michael Thomas go do something
That
other than play football, probably.
I don't think he's going to be a Saint for very much longer.
He can't be, right? I mean, like the problem is like people have been talking about like this guy had the one good year and that was all he ever was. I'm like he is a really good player. It's just that again his legs don't work.
Yeah, look,
reason.
Michael Thomas is a fantastic slot receiver. He gets amazing separation. And that's what was so good for Drew Brees, who needs that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you can't pay that much money to a slot receiver because at the end you need and as good as he was, it's not a commodity in this day and age in the NFL that commands that much money because you need guys like Chris Olave who can go down the sidelines and get you a bomb. That wasn't happening with Michael Thomas. And then when you factor in all the injuries, it just gets so messy.
I still do think the injuries is really the biggest problem because I think that the contract probably would have been looked at kind of badly no matter what, but like it would have been, instead of it being like, oh, you know, maybe you didn't need to pay Michael Thomas that much, even though he like broke the record for reception or anything. He's still a good player, right?
He's
really
still a great receiver.
It's because of those injuries that make it like you cannot justify him being on this football team. Like if he's able to get healthy and go be great somewhere else, that's fantastic for him. It can't be here, at least not at the current salary. So that's going to be interesting. But
that's the only problem I have with this whole Derek Carr situation is it's like, okay, you're going to go to the Saints, but like, what does that really even do? Like, what does that mean? I don't know.
I mean, it could be a good way for him to rehabilitate his career a little bit just because he's going to have some weapons still there no matter what. They're trying to win, so they're going to be making moves to try to win. The team isn't going to be bad. It's that is it good enough to do anything? Because even if they get to the playoffs, right, let's say they can beat the whatever is going on in the NFC South next year, which, again, I don't even know what to think of any of these teams yet. Maybe if the Falcons do something crazy and maybe they get Lamar or something, then they're going to probably win it. But outside of that, like all these teams are wide open right now. Mm-hmm. If they win the NFC South like a 9-8 record, does it matter to anybody? Like, does anybody care? Because you're going to get destroyed.
No. Time out. To the Saints in the city of New Orleans,
I guess
absolutely, but that's the problem.
I know,
and This is something.
I can't say anything. I'm a Steelers fan. We're consistent. Like we can't lose. We're even if we're bad, we're not bad enough. And if we're good, we're not good enough.
This is something that's creeping into the NFL and has already taken over the NCAA and college football. People have forgotten that this game is very much a regional game. Like fans are fans of teams and support their teams. And yes, they might seem crazy, but it's not about like if it's a winning thing or a losing thing. It's about like, oh no, that's my home team. That's the team that I can go see. And like, if there's a game on the weekend or during the week for basketball and hockey and all that, I can go see my team. And that's what it's been slowly. And this is what I'm a Virginia Tech Hokies fan. And it's what pisses me off about the NCAA right now is that all that matters anymore is the NCAA championship. That's all that matters. And do you know how many Division I FBS football teams there are? And we start the season
or something.
It's something like that.
132 now.
132 or 129, 132. Like and we start the season every year knowing pretty much which 4 teams are going to be there. And yet that's all we talk about. And that's all we care about. I'm sorry. I like my Hokies getting to a hopefully 10-win season and getting to a bowl game and hopefully representing because that's what it is really about because not everyone can make that stupid game.
You make a good point, Zach, that I think one of our, maybe not this next one because there's stuff specifically with the NFL going on, but there is a good idea for a show that we could probably do at some point in this format, probably just doing it on the show, and I'll just make a note of it now. The culture of ring or nothing has really become a problem for a lot of sports. I'm doing the Grizzlies thing. I know I told you guys about. Like I'm writing for the Grizzlies page for their fan-sided page. I run the site.
I'm sure that's a ball.
Yeah, right I don't even want to talk about
a lot of content.
Much. Yeah, the point is, regardless of the situation with that,
money on money is what I see.
The problem with it is players are looked at and this happens in the NFL and the NCAA and everywhere else, players are often looked at or teams are looked at solely on their ability to win a championship or not. And the problem with that ultimately, right, is that only one team can fricking do that every year. So that tells me that only one team every year matters because they only matter once they finish the job. That is such a bad way to look at sports in general as a fan or a historian or people who are being paid to talk about it. If you only care about whether or not they're going to win a championship, you don't have a whole lot to talk about. Like with Lamar, like Lamar's story is so fun because no matter where he goes, are they probably going to win the championship next year? No. If he stays with the Ravens, they're probably not going to win it. But it doesn't matter because guess what? He's so much fun to watch. I want to see him go to either a different team or the Ravens finally put up and like actually put a team around him that he can succeed on again. Even if it doesn't end up in a championship, that's what I want to see. Like I don't care if they win a title, especially if it's the Ravens, but that's beside the point.
I think it's very interesting we're bringing this up because I think the three of us are like a fantastic microcosm for the teams that we are a fan of. Because Shayne, you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. You have all of the championship success. Tony, you are a Bills fan. They've been to the Super Bowl, but it's the
they
chase.
haven't. No, Zach. They don't worry about that.
It's been the chase. I am a Dolphins fan. We have the perfect season, and that's what we hold on to. But like, it's been this long like desire to like, and that's where we're talking about the Saints right now.
Yeah.
What do the Saints mean to the city of New Orleans? Everything. Yeah, like the biggest thing that city has. And that's why this whole idea of like, oh no, they want to tear it down. They have to lose. No, they don't. Before they did that. But after Katrina, things changed. They rallied and like, it's become an absolute, like it's become a beautiful sports city.
It's a rock for the
city. And that's where this all hangs up because now you bring emotions into a business aspect. And that's where I talk about regional. We're looking at the NFC South. And we're like, oh my gosh, it's awful. But those teams just care about their surrounding areas. That's what they're focused on because they have diehard fan bases.
All right. So there's like a false dichotomy we're talking about here. What fans want and what you feel pride in after the fact should not match what front office and ownership are striving for.
No,
your team should be positioning and striving for a Super Bowl. That should be on their minds. It does not mean they go Super Bowl or bust and cash all their chips in all the time. No, it means that they should be responsible with the end goal, the ultimate vision. The believe sign in the locker room in Ted Lasso is a Super Bowl. You want a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You are satisfied after the season. If you make the playoffs, you win your division. Yeah, you have some shit to talk about. The fans, yeah, you should be happy about that. You should feel pride in that. But if you're the New Orleans Saints ownership and front office, if you know that no matter what you do, a Super Bowl is not in the cards for you, and the best thing you can do is like the best possible result is you sneak into the playoffs and prolong mediocrity for another year, you should make a move. You should not be you shouldn't be taking the fan perspective as the front office saying, hey, I just want to be relevant every year. I just want to maybe have a chance to sneak into the playoffs and win my division. I want to feel good about that. No, that's for the fans to do. That's for us to do. That's for us to say, hey, they get their flowers. It's the front office's job to strive for a Super Bowl. And prolonging mediocrity is the exact opposite of striving for a Super Bowl. So if they have fans running the front office, then yeah, keep on the path they're doing. But if they have real people running their front office who want to win football games, they got to make some changes, man, because it is not a Super Bowl path that they're on. They are chasing mediocrity. They are chasing relevance. That is not what you should be doing as a front office. You're doing your fans a disservice. They should feel pride when you end up winning, but you are doing your fans a disservice. You are actively working against them if you are not trying to win a Super Bowl.
They are chasing a dragon from 2012. Is that correct? Is that the Super Bowl? 2012 or was it 2010?
2009, 2010 season.
I think I actually think the pass interference thing is what sparked the most recent run of Saints attempts. Like I think thinking they deserved it. That reset the clock on them needing to strive for it. Yeah.
It was the back-to-back because it was actually even 3 years in a row because you had the pass interference and then you had the Minneapolis Miracle and then you had whatever the heck that was with what's his name, tight end from the Vikings.
Kyle
Kyle Rudolph, yeah, when there was the offensive pass interference that should have
right.
been called in the end zone. And
Yeah.
it like, but that's the thing. I don't view it as like the fans that is like it's fans running the front office. I think it's that like they genuinely believe that they have a winning chance and that they have a roster that they can, but they don't. And it's the Saints. And somehow they keep kicking this can down the curb and they're just going to find out how long it can go. It's almost run out of distance, but they're going to, if they can make it work for like 1 or 2 more years, they're going to try.
Yeah, I think just to put this to bed so we can focus on the combine a little bit before we head out for today. If your 5-year plan as an organization does not include a Super Bowl win, then you're not doing it right. Let me put it that way. Even 3-year plan, I'd say possibly, because we see the turnaround times for some of these teams. You get your quarterback right, and then 2 years later, if you haven't figured out a way to get pretty far in the playoffs, you probably aren't doing it right. Like that's been the model. If you either that or have Patrick Mahomes on your team. So
and Tom Brady retiring didn't help this either, because then that also, like we said,
it opens up stuff in the NFC South. Yeah,
exactly. It opens up this idea that like, oh, if we can sneak into the playoffs, we could have a chance, because that's what everybody thinks. But like
everybody thinks that, but
no, you're going to be worse than the 7th seed wildcard team. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just what it is. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that card deal ultimately looks like and who it's with. But I do think it's going to be the Saints. But
no, Atlanta or Carolina is winning the AFC South or NFC South this year. That is.
I still think so. Yes, but we'll see. So I want to get into combines notes just a little bit. Some of the stuff here. I want to start with the defensive line. That first group that went through. We saw some stupid times from the edge group, especially. Nolan Smith, I want to start with him. Okay. Now, he has his warts as a player, mostly the injury history, I would say. That's really the biggest knock on him. He came in, weighed about 238, a little over 6'2", if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check his measurements, but a little small for an edge, obviously. But the thing about him I think is interesting is his speed off the edge is not the thing that flashes for me. It's his physicality in the run game at Georgia. So
he blows up runs at 238.
So I'm not really worried about his size that much, because realistically, if a team draftsman says, hey, we really would like you to put on 10 pounds, I think he can do that without sacrificing much as far as athleticism. For him to go out there, even at a smaller edge, and run 4.39 is hilarious to me. Like, that is disgusting. And everything about him screams like a guy that he's just a clean prospect outside of the injuries. Like if he can stay healthy, he's at minimum, I think, to be an amazing edge setting presence and probably a 7 to 10 sack kind of guy just with his speed off the edge alone. And this was a former 5-star recruit, like I believe maybe the number 1 recruit in the nation when he came out. Like all the physical tools were clearly there. I think this combine kind of just solidifies that he's a special athlete. Like we already kind of assumed that he was going to test super, super well. This is a different level than that, honestly, kind of a level above that. And it wasn't just him. Byron Young out of Tennessee really flashed. So he showed a lot, I think, at Tennessee in his year there after transferring. But it's just, again,
Tome Adebawore.
I need to talk about him.
From Northwestern. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, he's really the guy. Like, if we're looking at, like, a height, like, not even height, but a height weight guy, like, Kalijah Clancy, I want to give him some love here because he broke the record for 40-yard dash at the combine for defensive tackle. But
I'll hold my tongue until you finish.
About 282 is what Adebawore listed at, the same weight basically. 4.49.
And he played 3-tech in college. So if we're calling Kalijah Clancy a 3-tech,
exactly,
we should be calling Tome
Adebawore both can
play
essentially the same role. And again, I think the athleticism difference is pretty stark, even as athletic as Clancy is. I think that, again, this defensive line group is just so athletic, you can tell. I don't know how many of them are actually going to be able to translate some of that athleticism, especially the guys that weren't thought of as high-level prospects prior to the combine, because we see this every year. Guys will show up and they'll test unbelievably well, and then you don't really hear about them ever again. And that's fine. But I think some of these guys, you can see it on the tape, though, for some of these guys. Because even, considering the times, for Will Anderson running a 4.6 doesn't seem that crazy. But that's still a really good time for an edge player. Really, really good time. And he profiles very similarly sized.
You go out and try to run a 4.6.
Yeah, exactly. I ain't running a 5. I ain't running a 6.6, I don't think, let alone a 4.6. But I think the problem is, a lot of these guys, they tested unbelievably well. It's just how well is that going to translate? Does that show up on film? I think for some of these guys, definitely. guy like Lucas Van Ness ran a 4.58. I don't know if I see that on tape necessarily. I think he's a really good player, but I don't know if I see that type of speed and athleticism on tape. And I think that he's a weird in between player because I think he can play edge for you, but he isn't very fluid in general. And I think that he's still inexperienced. So do you play him more inside? It's just going to kind of be like, what does this translate to in the NFL? Do some of these guys show up or not?
Isn't that why the 40 splits seem to be a bit more important?
Yeah, the 10 yard is
the
like
10 yard
the
split
thing.
That's really for edge rushers especially because that's all you have to do is get. That's all you're ever going to run is 10 yards.
And that's the thing is like we always get so caught up in the 40-yard dash. Really, the only people the 40-yard dash can really matter for, I would say, are defensive backs, wide receivers, and running backs, because running back breaks off. How fast can they run 40 yards? Wide receivers running a go. How fast can they run 40 yards? The defensive back is covering a go. How fast can they run 40 yards? Those are your only opportunities where you're running 40 straight yards in the NFL.
I would still even say the 10-yard split matters still more than the 40 for really every position, because if you're a receiver and if you can get that much separation in the first 10 yards from a guy, it doesn't matter if they're a little bit faster than you because you're already past them.
And long speed should be measured off the GPS because we have that data now.
Oh, yes.
Like long speed
it's not
exactly.
Yeah.
But
the 40 should be a 10-yard burst.
There's only like 4 or 5 instances where like somebody is going to be running 40 yards that for everybody, the media, fans, everybody, to put so much into this one drill. It's like, okay, cool, fun.
It's fun to talk about, but again, some of the other measurements that matter a lot more, the explosive measurements, for like the vertical broad jump, like those explosive movements, when guys can do that, it does give you the idea, at least they might have a little bit more upside, especially players that maybe didn't get a fair shake in college to show some of that stuff. Like I would say, like there's a receiver from West Virginia, Bryce Ford Wheaton, right?
Yes,
that guy. I watched a lot of his tape early on because he's one of the players that I was watching a lot, because West Virginia is pretty close to Pittsburgh. I get a lot of those, or to Pennsylvania, I get a lot of those games and stuff like that. He flashed a lot of the stuff that he showed off at the combine, and it just didn't put it together all the time because that team just wasn't very good. He's a guy that I think if you get him in the mid to late rounds and let him kind of sit behind a receiver that knows how to play a little bit more as the route runner type, and he can get some of the routes down, because that's, I think, his biggest weakness is he's a big body, fast guy that doesn't really know how to take advantage of that as much as he could. He put up a 10. I think his RAS ended up being a 10. Like, I think legitimately a 10.
Yeah, obviously it was 10 unofficial. I haven't seen the official numbers.
Exactly,
come through,
but he profiled.
Shout out Math Mom.
Yes, Math.
Yes,
huge.
Absolutely.
Awesome website, fantastic. I think
Amazing
that he's a guy that you
I still work with him.
That's cool. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I work with him over at PFN.
That's right. He does stuff with them.
Yeah. He has completely like redefined how we look at combine test scores, and it's beautiful.
And his database is so it's like gives you a really good baseline
for what you
sparked
a hell of a debate in the ATB group this week.
I didn't even get to.
I didn't see it.
That was started. The Jarvis Landry debate was started by his RAS score.
He is one of the worst athletes to become successful.
Literally somebody asked Kent, he was like, what is the worst person to be the best? And he's like, without a doubt, nobody has come close to Jarvis Landry. Now there is context in the fact that he was injured. Yeah, but I think it's I don't know. The problem I have with saying
good. Do we want to talk?
He's good enough to be in this conversation. He's Jarvis Landry good.
I like.
So the problem with that I always have when this comes up is like, yes, that's his RAS score, but he also like had non-existent hamstrings when he was at the combine. So
there's a lot of context involved in something.
Yeah, there is context involved, but his RAS score was awful. So.
It was bad, but again, I think like some of the receivers that people will say like disappointed, like people like, oh, Jalen Hyatt's supposed to be this deep threat. He ran 4.4. 4.4 is still really fast, guys. Like I know the numbers are so ridiculous some of these years where it's like, man, I don't know, 4.4 is that really impressive anymore? It's still fast.
It's still insane.
It's crazy. Like obviously, if Hyatt ran 4.26, that might be a little bit cooler to watch. But is it going to change my evaluation of him? No, because again, he still is going to win the exact same way. It doesn't change how he won. Do I have a lot of questions about him? Yes, but that's not really for this conversation right now. But you see some of the other guys, like guys at the top of the board. Like if you look at Jordan Addison, like did he disappoint with his RAS score? Yes.
Yeah, he should not be in the top 26 picks.
Yeah, right. Did I expect him to test for super well though? Not really, because it's not the kind of player he is. Really, he's not a burner. He's not.
But Jackson. Jackson
Man,
Smith.
he had himself a day.
Yeah.
Smart man not running the 40 because that would have changed things. But goddamn, he's setting records at the quickness measures.
He's a 4.6 straight line athlete and that's about
That's
it.
generous.
Yeah, I would say
he was going to run a 4.8.
No, I don't.
That man is slow.
Tony, come on. I've seen him at least run enough. Like, I don't think he's so slow that he's like 4.7-ish.
I think there is
4.65.
If he runs a 4.6 at the combine, people are like, hell yeah, good run, dude. Way to go, you boosted your stock. He didn't run. He wasn't gonna hit a 4.6.
I mean, that's tough. I mean, I understand.
He was very smart to not run because he doesn't need to. He needs to show off his agilities and his like route running and shit. But man, I don't think he was gonna run.
God bless Brian Hartline. God bless Brian Hartline.
Yeah, seriously. But again, I just think overall, like the receivers, people kind of have this idea like that they disappointed. I don't agree with that because again, a lot of these guys, we didn't expect them to test unbelievably. Hyatt, yeah, and some of the other guys, speed wise, yeah. But
my favorite mid round guy showed out, so I'm happy with the wide receiver performance.
You wanna
my guy Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss.
Man,
Brandon Beane has been harping on getting rack all offseason, the run after the catchability. Man, you talk about 6'2", 220, running a 4.46 with an insane top 10-yard split. Like, that man is speed to power. He can shake off tackles. He catches it and goes. Like, Ole Miss didn't use him all that often, and he was kind of injured at one point, but that is my guy. I love me some Jonathan Mingo.
Fair enough. Another guy I want to talk about when we move over to corners real quick. Emmanuel Forbes was light.
He's 166?
166.
Holy shit.
Now, see, I really like him.
Oh, man, that's only 26 pounds heavier than me. I love this generation of NFL players that are more like my size because I'm like, oh, man, maybe if I had gotten to football early, I would have had a chance.
Maybe if I did it. Emmanuel Forbes, though, 166 is a little rough. I'm not going to lie. I don't love the idea of him getting hit by a 220-pound running back come to the hole. However,
especially when he loves delivering the hits.
He does, and that's great.
I don't think that's going to work out well for him.
I don't know. He also, admittedly, I think he probably could play at 180. I think something had to have been going on because there's no way that man. Because I've seen enough of him to be like he's not 166 pounds. He didn't even really look 166 at the combine. If I'm being honest with you, he didn't look that thin. I mean, he was definitely a smaller, slighter guy than maybe he looked like on film, but it's still he wasn't so small that I'm like, oh, I don't like the way that guy concerns me. It'll be interesting to see what if that does anything. I think if he shows up at pro day stuff closer to 175-ish or better, it won't really be an issue. But that number definitely stuck out with me. Something the corners really ran super well too. That was definitely interesting to see. I mean, some of them made sense. I expected Ringo to run well, although again, I'm kind of souring on him as a prospect at this point in terms of especially a first round or maybe second round for sure.
I think Deonte Banks is the biggest winner at cornerback. He's locked into the first round now. His tape was already there, and holy shit, he's an athlete.
His athletic testing definitely showed up. I know my boy Tomlin likes the Maryland guys, so maybe
it's been interesting this season because my motivation for the draft and the combine have been a little low because the Dolphins don't have a first round pick for whatever stupid reason.
Who needs first round picks, right? Ask the Rams. How did that work out? No.
Yeah, and then also Virginia Tech had an awful season, so I haven't had much draft type to see where they're going. But my man Chamari Connor showed out in the combine as well, so I was happy to see that. He probably won't play cornerback, but he make good safety.
Yeah, overall, like I said, I think the defensive backs really showed out really well. I think edge and corner really stood out at the combine, and there's a reason for that because that's the best two groups in this class. I think overall, I think it just is. You never know, but
do we want to dive into what everybody wants to hear about?
Oh, we're gonna get to that next. Yeah.
Good.
Oh, I know.
I got thoughts.
I'm so excited. This was very interesting.
Go for it, Zach. You want to kick us off?
Oh, quarterback measurements. Speaking of people my size. And we talked about the small quarterbacks earlier. I'm exaggerating with my size, but for a quarterback, it's basically my size. Bryce Young, what do we think?
It's not real. It's not a real number. It doesn't matter. Nothing changes after that. All Bryce Young showed us is that he can pack on 20 pounds if he needs
ahead of a timed weight.
Yeah, and like then it doesn't do anything. So all he proved to us is that one, he is not normally 204 pounds. Two, he cannot play at 204 pounds. He cannot do anything at 204 pounds. Nothing has changed. If you came into the combine thinking, yeah, Bryce Young's size does not matter, you walked away from it being like, ha, screw all you guys, his size doesn't matter. He weighed 204 pounds, only 3 pounds less than Kyler Murray, same height. And if you walked into the combine saying, hey, this kid is kind of light as hell, a historical outlier, I have my concerns, you still have your concerns. We learned nothing about Bryce Young other than he wasn't willing to be at his own weight and try to show off against the other quarterbacks. I'm probably reading too much into it, and I was already a bit lower on him already, but man, I think all four of these guys can play in the NFL, can be NFL starters. I might have Bryce Young at fourth out of them in my order, just because I have major concerns about his abilities at his size, and the other guys I know will at least hold up. Like, it's scary. It's scary. He's an 185 little boy. He is not.
Let me speak from the viewpoint of a team with another small Alabama quarterback. It's going to be terrifying if you draft him, because one good hit, that man is going to fold into a lawn chair. He's if he was a wide receiver, this would not be a problem. If he was anywhere, the issue is you are going to have 4, 5, 6 massive humans trying to track you down on every single snap. And we saw it this year with Tua. If you get hit just right, now you're going to be missing quite a few games, because you're going to go through a car crash simulation without going into a car crash. So like you said, I said this when it was the 2020 draft. All of these dudes can probably play in the NFL, but if you have reservations about his size, given what's happened to other quarterbacks of his size over the past couple of seasons, you fully have that right to. That's not a knock on him. It's just every single prospect has negatives. You can't just sit there and say nobody has any negatives, because that's ridiculous. Everybody has pros and cons. Unfortunately, his weight is his con. Does that affect his playing ability? Yes. When he puts on to 204 pounds, it does. So if you want him to be him, you have to let him play at his weight, because he's not used to not playing at that weight.
So I haven't solidified my quarterback rankings just because I need to go back and watch all of them again. But so it's tough. Like you said, Tony, it's difficult, because if I'm just ranking the quarterbacks and how good they are at playing quarterback, Bryce Young is
Bryce Young's an easy one.
He's comfortably ahead of the other guys, and that doesn't mean that the other guys aren't really good. It's just he's that much better, in my opinion, as an actual quarterback right this minute. If I needed to win a game in the NFL tomorrow and I didn't have to worry about how the rest of his career panned out, he's my pick 100 times out of 100. Right?
Who has
CJ Stroud is the only other one I'd consider.
Maybe, but again,
what team would we consider to be the best overall situation for a quarterback to not necessarily available, but best overall offense, that if you were to plant a rookie in
that needs a quarterback? Or
no. I'm just saying in general.
Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay,
Yeah.
so think of the Philadelphia Eagles. If they were number one, who would you be drafting to just fuck?
Well, they wouldn't.
Anthony Richardson.
They wouldn't take Young, because he's not going to be able to run the offense they want to run.
Okay,
but,
then that's fair. But I guess
talking
that's
about
more so.
any probably the Chiefs then, because they're as creative as anyone
also
ever has
O-line,
been.
yeah.
As they ever have been. So that's probably
That's true. That gets into a very complicated question, because depending on the team, depends on what the quarterback they're looking for. But I guess more my point is if you have solid protection and good to great weapons, who would you be picking to be first quarterback taken if you're that team?
Again,
I'm going to go with my QB1 and say Stroud, because
I like Young the most, so I'm taking Young. But
I think Stroud is close enough to Young in just being a really good football player right now, and I don't have the same injury concerns about him. So if I want to win now, and I also I want to give my guy a second contract, it's Stroud. If I want the ceiling, then yeah, I'm going AR. If I want Ryan Tannehill, a serviceable guy, Will Levis, and if I want a guy who can come in and play for a couple years, but I don't know how many I'm getting out of him, It's Bryce Young. So it's a pick your flavor kind of situation. But man,
I just think
there's
the
real
I
concerns.
don't recommend the Will Levis Ryan Tannehill route. That never works out.
I just don't think the
Spoken from
problem with it.
experience.
The problem
They
with it,
got
Tony,
two
is like
at AFC Championship game.
it's not that you're wrong,
Not the
Tony.
Dolphins.
It's not that you're wrong, Tony, about Young's like the concern about him. It's that to me, like the injury concerns don't exist because he hasn't been injured yet. I understand like that doesn't mean he won't be, but I'm not going to assume
Okay.
he's going to get injured just because he's small. I'm not. I can't.
Okay.
Because if you play that way, like you're taking a quarterback that, again, in my opinion, and maybe in a lot of opinion of others, is the best one in this class at playing quarterback. If you remove him from your board because of his size, again, I understand it, but you're taking the best quarterback in the draft off the board.
See,
I'm not
I don't
going to
think
do
the
that.
gap between him and the
Shayne.
other guys is that big.
Shayne,
So
I
I'm
understand.
gonna
At this
lean-
point, I am, but yeah,
I understand what you're saying, but so again with Tua, there was only one injury in college, and it was that ridiculous whatever the heck that
It was a
hit
freak accident. It was
Yes.
is not
So-
something you can
so
extrapolate forward.
literally take that away, and he did not get injured in college. That then there were concerns about his size. You put him in the NFL. We have had 2 seasons now of he's a smaller dude.
Let me ask
They
you
haven't
that.
had the
Do you
best
think that
protection.
Do you think
He's
that his
been
injuries are
blasted.
because of his size or because he's had head injuries? Though?
The rib. Well, okay,
The head
ribs
injuries
one-
popped up this year for the first time. The previous
ribs,
years.
the ribs one, I do believe the ribs one is absolutely a size thing because the
You don't
man
think
got
if he was 6'6", his
destroyed.
ribs would have been broken if he got hit like that?
I think he would have had more
Got
padding,
more
and
muscle, more padding.
and-
Also, the
and-
head
and
injuries
fall
too.
back on-
If you
and-
are
and the head
6'5",
injuries.
230, and
You
you
can
get
fall
pushed,
better.
you don't fall on your head like Tua
that,
does.
that's the thing.
That's
That was the
fine,
thing about
but-
his concussions this year is it what like one of them was like a pretty nasty like tackle that like was like, oh man, that kind of sucked, but like whatever. The other two, he kind of just got pushed and fell and like hit kind of hard, but like that's where like when you're smaller, I'm a smaller dude. If I fall, it's gonna be bad. Like that, and like bigger guys that we see bigger quarterbacks be able to take so much more of a beating because they have more of the padding. So I do think size, especially with how fast and physical the NFL has become, is a massive factor.
All I'll say with this, and again, I'm not saying that I don't understand where you guys are coming from. If I have the first pick in the draft, right? If I feel like if I don't take the player that I think is the best player,
Oh yeah,
I'm risking not getting him solely because I'm concerned about something that hasn't happened yet. And I think if you have the first pick, if you really think he's the best player, you have to be willing to take the chance on a guy, even though he's an outlier, if you really think he's the best. And again, if you have him neck and neck with CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson, which I don't at this point, maybe by the time I'm done talking, like watching them all again, maybe I will. Then yeah, I understand taking the guy that you feel is more likely to work out because of his size profile. That's totally fine. But if you're the Colts, right, if you trade up for the first pick, if you have Young comfortably ahead the rest of those guys on your board as far as a player goes, and the only thing you're hanging up on is his size, I don't know if I'm going to be willing to just not draft him because of it.
yeah.
But if you think CJ Stroud is a tick below, like, Tony, if you're very close with those guys as players and not factoring in size, then yeah, I understand going with the guy that has more of a profile that's worked in the NFL. Right?
Well, yeah, and that's the whole pros and cons thing. Like
Right,
you're saying right now, like one of the only cons for you for Bryce Young is his size.
That's the major
you-
one. There's other
but-
things, obviously.
But you
that
have
matter.
more major cons for all of these other quarterbacks. So like in your analysis and stuff, that makes sense. Whereas
My risk
like,
reward benefit, yeah, I would
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that I'm more concerned about some of the other stuff than simply his
yeah,
size.
yeah, and that makes sense. And like I said, I totally understand going on the side of caution of like saying it's never happened. But again, Tua never got concussions at Alabama and never had a broken ribs. He got one crazy weird hit at the
Yeah.
end of a half and
Yes,
almost had his leg destroyed. Like that's where like there's a lot of players where like they've never had any injuries, but then they come in and it's just like I said, that one good pop because it's the NFL.
Yeah, again, that can happen to anybody though, and that's my
Oh, yeah.
kind of thing. Is like,
But then when
yeah,
you're
is he
but when
more
you're smaller,
susceptible to it?
you're more
Theoretically,
susceptible.
yes,
Yeah.
He is more theoretically susceptible.
I think an important piece of the puzzle that we're not necessarily directly talking about right now is that no team drafting at the top of this draft is drafting for this upcoming season. They're not trying to take the best player right now. They are trying to take who they think they can turn into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Bryce Young is the closest based off of current play to being in that tier, but his ceiling is pretty much where he's at. He can get a little better, but he's what he's going to be for the entirety of his career. The other guys, you have to look at where they are now and where you think their ceiling is. CJ Stroud, I think he's close right now. He's close to Bryce Young. I think he's got untapped potential. I don't think Ohio State utilized his legs all that much. There's something there that I think you can coach up. Anthony Richardson is the obvious case of, he is just a ball of clay right now, and if you fix his mechanics on his throwing, then holy shit. And so
even
I'm trying to think of it.
Throws in the drills were freaking gorgeous.
When his mechanics are sound, it's perfect. But
and that's all it takes.
I think the key thing is 3 years from now, what are these guys going to be? And if I am leading a front office, I already have to have, just by default, I have faith in my coaches, right? I'm not going to be the GM of a team and not have faith in my coaches. Yeah. So do I want to bet on, hey, we're going to take a guy who's really good right now and hope he just stays good and hope he doesn't get hurt? Or am I going to take a guy who I say, hey, if my coaches are as good as I think they are, and we take this guy, we are going to have the best quarterback in the NFL potentially. Mm-hmm. I'm going for that ceiling case because Bryce Young in 3 years could be out of the league. He's not a safe guaranteed pick. So why not swing for the damn fences when you're looking at the range of outcomes? And so that's at least my, how, if I were GM, I'd be looking at this saying, I want the guy who I think I can turn into the best quarterback in the NFL. And that's Anthony Richardson. I just think it's like that. You have to look 3 years out and what these guys can be. And I just don't think that we're giving enough credit to the development ability of the other guys. And when you factor in all of those things, Bryce Young doesn't look like a slam dunk.
6'4", 244 pounds. The man set records for quarterbacks with a 40.5-inch vertical and a 10'9" broad jump. And in his only attempt, uncorked a 4.43 second 40-yard dash. This is what people thought Malik Willis was. This is literally what this is, and he's
done it against the SEC.
And that was the point I was going to make. Look, I understand what people thought Malik Willis was, but it was Liberty. They are an independent school in the middle of nowhere in Virginia. They're not playing an actual schedule that commands competition, and some of them crack in, but how many Liberty players do you see starting on NFL rosters across the league? Look, I understand that's what but he did this against the SEC. Yes, were there questionable performances? Absolutely. But this is also the Florida Gators, and they were in their first year of development with all of their head coaching stuff. I don't necessarily think that he was going to have that much development, as they are probably looking more towards the future. And that's that weird spot of the turnover in college sports where you're pretty high up on being the team, and it's I'm here, but I understand that you guys I need to focus on myself and you guys need to focus on you. It gets a little strange, but this is what the combine is built for, to see instances like this where there's flashes on tape and you can see stuff, and then the testing comes out and you're like, oh yeah, this could work. This can actually be the thing that we thought it could be.
Yeah, I think overall, the combine really showed a lot of the elite athleticism that continues to only get more elite, seems like, every year. But again, I feel like a lot of the best players in the class weren't always necessarily the best testers, and that's just generally how it works anyway. A lot of the guys are going to end up testing well if they're obviously at the top of the draft, but you see, Richardson, is he going to be – I don't think he'll be the second or third quarterback taken possibly. I think he might be at this point. I think he could be over Levis very easily, so he probably is third at this point for a lot of teams. He's second on a lot of boards apparently, from what I've heard.
I think this is going to be one of those. Here's the problem with the combine, and it doesn't really it tells you a little bit, but it doesn't really change all that much because film tells you the most. Seeing players against players tells you the most, because doing it against air doesn't simulate NFL football. No. Now, some of these performances can add on to the tape and add on to what you're seeing and confirm things. And that's when you get some of these instances. And I think that's what a lot of these NFL scouts are going to see is, okay, Anthony Richardson played in the SEC. This isn't necessarily a Malik Willis situation where we don't have the quality of competition to worry about where like he only was dunking on really bad teams, and then when it came time to play a somewhat decent defense, they folded. Like these testing
Also,
numbers.
Anthony Richardson is he's the best pocket manager in the class. His feet in the pocket, his ability to like just always be aware of his surroundings and know how to fight through a messy pocket to still deliver a strike downfield to a receiver coming open. He's already got those NFL traits that other guys in this class don't. He's got traits that only Bryce Young has in this class. And he's also got all that athleticism to boot. Yeah. Like he's not the raw guy we're talking about. He's raw. Don't get me wrong.
Like we were talking,
he's not the project we're talking about here.
And we were talking earlier about like the lack of depth and like the backup quarterback position. And we also mentioned the XFL earlier, and this is a very big critique of the XFL early on, is the play of offensive line. People need to realize that offensive line depth in the NFL itself on the starting line is so thin. Like you don't have a lot of, and that's why there are so many bad offensive lines across the NFL, because you got 32 teams just duking it out for the best dudes that can provide protection. So if you've got a guy that can come in and navigate a pocket like Dan Marino, like if you're a team with a bad offensive line, then you got to possibly take that chance.
Yeah, I think overall, like I said, the combine is still going on right now. I'm actually going to be watching it right after this. I'm going to get that put on and watch the offensive linemen, my guys, definitely running backs as well. But definitely going to move on to next week here. We're going to talk about the rest of the stuff that we didn't get to with the combine. We're going to have some stuff to talk about from today as well. And we're going to start to see kind of where teams are at with certain players. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more rumors about, what teams are interested in what players. I know I'll be interested in see what my Steelers do because they tend to not really do a good job of not tipping their hand exactly. So, which is good as a person who's looking to see what they're going to do, but bad for the team because they probably then may not get those players that they want.
And we will also be 3 days away from the start of NFL free agency.
Yes, we can definitely preview that a little bit, talk about some stuff with that too. But all right, that's going to be it for us this week, guys. Definitely join us next week if you want to look at, again, NFL free agency preview, like Zach said, talk about the rest of the stuff at the combine and just any news that's going on in the NFL. But you guys have a great rest of your weekend.